Hey everybody, and welcome to the second Ask Me Anything event with the Minnesota High Tech Association. We hope these AMAs provide an insight into the mind of company leaders and thought leaders by allowing members of the Minnesota tech community an opportunity to ask them questions about their roles, issues they deal with, and their lives. My name is Ray Hoover, and I am the Membership and Sponsorship Director with the Minnesota High Tech Association. I'll be moderating the event. Today, we are very excited to have Pat Joyce, the VP and Chief Information Security Officer at Medtronic, here with us. Hey, Pat.
Hey Ray, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day. So I'm going to explain some ground rules first for everyone. Everyone here is muted, and after an introduction from Pat, you can type your questions into the question window located into the dashboard on the right of your screen. So I'm going to kick it over to Pat. Pat, go ahead.
Well, great. Thanks, Ray, and thanks to Jeff and the whole team at the MHTA for your leadership in this time, for changing the programs up, and for bringing these types of events forward. We're living in some strange times, as we all know. I don't need to tell you that. It's a time when we couldn't have predicted it, but in some ways we couldn't. And we'll talk more about that as time goes on. So I'm honored to be able to participate in this and be involved. I want to make a couple quick comments and just kind of set the tone of a few things, and then we'll just go into questions. When I think about looking back 60 days, 75 days ago in what I refer to as the old world, people in my role would get lots of questions every day, every hour about being secure. How can we secure our environment? What do we do to prepare for different challenges and opportunities within our business, et cetera, et cetera. Those things haven't changed. In our new world, where we are all working in a very different scenario, those are still the same questions, but we're working under different circumstances. When you look at where most of us are, working from a home office or working from somewhere in a bedroom or wherever, there's challenge. Obviously, physical challenges, but there's cyber challenges as well. We call that being out in the wild. Before, you were probably on a corporate network. You might have been behind a whole series of different protective technologies and firewalls in your organization. Even if you're a remote worker, you probably had certain types of protections in place. In many cases, a lot of organizations were not prepared to have literally everybody disperse and go work from all these different locations. And it's not just a case of bandwidth. It's not just a case of the technologies, and we'll talk more about that. But it is really, you aren't behind those protective layers of your enterprise environments. And so that being out in the wild is a big deal. Not to mention the bandwidth challenges we all have in our home environments, especially if you're competing with other people in the house who are streaming. The other thing that we look at is what we call the attack surface, or the geeks call the attack surface, is the range of places that you're vulnerable from a cyber standpoint have expanded significantly by everybody working remote. It isn't just being on a home ISP or on a home network. You may not have the technologies on your desktop, your endpoint, your tablet, your iPad, whatever, that protects you from certain types of activities. And so organizations are challenged right now with having to push that kind of stuff to their end users and find the ability to monitor and manage through that, because you may not have the same monitoring and management capabilities as you did when people were behind your network environments. Cyber crime or cyber criminals is a business. The whole attempt is obviously to take something that's not yours, whether it's intellectual property, whether it's private information, and then monetize that activity. So we all know about that. We've seen that for a long time. Those kind of threats really are the same, but the cyber criminals are modifying their business plans to react to and be responsive to the changes in our environment. So the attack surface growth, the vulnerabilities that we have in our home environments or on our devices, it changes, right? So there's a whole number of significant increase in COVID-19 related attacks that are underway, phishing attacks. It's the same level of precaution that you should have as you did before this happened. It should be actually more, I think, because they're taking advantage of leveraging the COVID-19 activity. There's a lot of other social engineering type things going on right now. Actually, there was I saw it yesterday online, I printed it out, so the old-fashioned, the FTC put out a thing called the FTC Scam Bingo. You can go out to the FTC website and pull it down. It's kind of fun, but it talks about all the different types of scams that are underway right now related to COVID-19, and as a result of everybody working remotely. So that social engineering is part of that. It's not just the technical aspects of it, it's the social engineering. You know, when we look at things at Medtronic from an enterprise standpoint, we've worked hard in recent years to enable the same level of protections beyond our network as we have for people that when they're on. So, but the same thing applies to our therapies. We do a lot of remote type of work, but we're doing even more remote work now as a result of not being able to have reps and people in the field in therapies or in surgical procedures. So we're actually working hard to try to put those capabilities in place. It's really about remote digital work. And when we look over the horizon at what's coming, I think not just the new normal, but the new abnormal, it's going to be all about changes. And we're not going to land this airplane back on the same runway that we took off from 60 days ago. We're going to land in a different place. Those technologies, whether they be to help with a procedure or to help you get work done or to help do teamwork in a remote setting, all that's going to have a big impact, I think, on our work environments. We're going to have office situations are going to be different. I think the office-based work is going to change over time. And so we're actively supporting our employees, our customers, our patients to try to deal with and address and take advantage of that new world order that we're going to be in, or we already are in, to understand what that is over the horizon or through the looking glass. Really, our goal is to enable, secure, reliable, change-ready environment, because we're going to have lots of change, we think, in the coming days, weeks, months, years as a result of this activity. So those are kind of some opening thoughts. With that, Ray, I'll turn it back to you, and we can dive into some questions.
Thanks, Pat. We've already got some coming in from the audience, so let's get to it. First one is, how has COVID-19 impacted people's cyber risk?
I talked a little bit about that. I think a lot of it depends upon, it's the old it depends. If your organization has worked to enable your mobile devices to be secure wherever they are, could be anti-phishing related software, could be web filtering software, could be endpoint protection software, could be some remote monitoring and almost AI type capabilities. So anomalies are detected on the endpoint. If those things are in place, you're never as good as you are behind a network firewall and those other protective technologies that we deploy there. But you're less exposed if you have those kind of capabilities in your remote setting. So whether it's COVID-19 or whether it was anything that would have forced you to not work within your environment, having those technologies at the endpoint are key, because that's where those attempts to have you get phished, that's where those attempts to have you click on something you shouldn't click on, that's where those attempts to get you to do something you wouldn't normally do to trick you, that's where those things are taking place.
Great. Venkat's got a really interesting question. What could or should be the priorities of a CISO during the post-COVID era?
That's a great question. And actually, there was an interesting study done a few weeks ago. And the CISO is kind of in a different, well, it's the same chair the CIO is in. It's about protecting the enterprise and enabling the business, right? So when you look at the things we've already talked about, which is all your workforce being dispersed, from a secure standpoint and from a capability standpoint, do you have the right tools there that they can do their job, that they can do team-oriented activities, making sure those things are deployed, making sure those endpoints are patched, making sure the patching is in place and it's up to date and it's kept up to date at both the network and at the endpoint level, so that you're actually running a secure enterprise. Those are the kind of the first half of the equation. Keep it secure. The second half is about enabling the business, right? Making sure that you're looking at third-party risk and looking at those things that can damage your enterprise, but that you're reacting very, very quickly to changes and needs within the business and within IT to help enable the business to be effective even in a remote setting. So it is that yin and yang of protection and enablement.
David's got an interesting question as well. Do you see a lot of these work from home activities becoming permanent? And will companies use the experience to reduce their physical footprint and thereby reduce their physical costs?
Oh, I think so. I've talked to a number of people about that, and I see it. It first of all, it gives people flexibility where they need flexibility, and take advantage of that. But certainly, there's a cost aspect. There's the there's the square footage brick and mortar costs, and frankly, I think people are going to find that there are advantages to working or splitting their time. So I think you're going to see much more of a situation where organizations are doing common shared spaces in the office if they aren't doing that already, and then having remote capabilities. As long as people can be as effective, outside the walls as they are inside the walls, and that puts the onus back on IT and on the CISO to help make that happen.
Jared has an interesting question. How can I protect myself working from my home network?
That's a good question. It kind of goes back to some of the same things we already talked about. It depends on, a lot of it depends on the devices. There's lots of things you can do at your home network in terms of from a firewall standpoint. There's settings that you can go in and make sure that you're doing the right thing with regard to the devices themselves. It all depends upon whether or not you've taken those measures and put the right kind of controls in place at the router or at the switch level.
Okay. Jeff has an interesting question here too. What does the new normal look like from your chair? It's hard for us to be able to predict right now, but as you sit here, what do you see moving forward?
Yeah, I think what we're planning for and working towards is to be able to go through a period, until we have strong testing in place, and until we have antibody knowledge, so that whether you were exposed or whether somebody you had antibodies in your system and you might be safer to be around other people. Until that testing regime is really out there, I think we're going to see, and others are saying the same thing, we're going to see that in and out, that sine wave of people going back to work, people working remote. I think we're going to see the new normal there is going to be, you won't have, if you had, just using raw numbers, if you had 100 people in an office before that were usually all there, you might not have those 100 people in that office. They might work part-time from home. They might work in a situation where they're remote. There might be more advantageous. I know a lot of organizations that were doing that already, but I think we're going to see more of that. And I think we're going to see as we go through the coming months, because of the waves that we're expecting, at least until a remedy is in place from a health standpoint to help protect people from inoculation. I think we're going to see some waves, and I think that's going to have a case where this week you may have worked in the office part of the week. Next week you're going to have to work from home because of something that happened. So having that change flexibility to be able to work from anywhere at any time, I think is probably going to be the new reality for us for a while.
We got an interesting question from Brendan. Was Medtronic prepared for work from home, and what can other organizations do to change their security controls to implement to allow work from home?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to knock on wood or knock on something here. I think we were prepared better than I thought we were. We've been working pretty hard for the last year, 2 years back to what I was saying earlier, is to protect our employees as much off the network as on the network. And so we've been making investments in new email defense platforms. We've been making investments in that will work from anywhere that are crowdsourced. We're doing the same thing. We've done the same thing with web filtering, so that again, you're as protected off the network as you are on. We've recently deployed some endpoint detection and response software that gives us a lot better visibility and protection of the endpoint. And we made sure that we, as we did that, everyone go home and work from home. There was a lot of work to be done to make sure that everything was patched to the right level and everyone had the right versions of things, because it was just critical that we do that. We've also made a lot of progress in just general hygiene patching on our servers and endpoints in recent years. So that's given us a better position to have people working remotely. So we were about as prepared as we probably could have been. There's always things we could have done differently. We had to scramble a little bit, but again, knock on wood, we're in a better place maybe than some.
Well, I'll knock on wood on this question as well. How can we use video conferencing in a secure way?
That's a great question. Lots of I'll call it information in the media about video conferencing in the last few weeks, and I don't know how much of it's about people's bad behaviors as much as the technology itself. And there's lots of different brands of stuff out there. We've all used it. We're using one here today. It is about the controls that are in place, and then it's about common sense. You take a look at things like, is encryption involved? Is there are they doing the right things when it comes to how data moves within the platform itself? What are the password controls in place, and how are those monitored and managed? What kind of domain level controls do you put in place around it? How is it hosted? Is it a public hosting? Is it a private instance? I mean, there's lots of things to look at from a risk standpoint. Is it a free version that you can use, you don't have to pay for, and you're going to get what you pay for there from a security standpoint? So whoever brand it is, whether it's this one or whether it's the other ones that are out there, taking a look at the security controls around it is probably a first step before diving in.
This next question is from Robert. Do you see organizations accelerating their move to the cloud, AWS, Azure, Google, in this environment? And if yes, what additional security concerns does that present?
Well, I'm not sure it's accelerating. There might be some acceleration in some organizations, but it's been a pretty significant flight to the cloud for a lot of organizations in recent times. As organizations go to consolidate data centers and consolidate applications, you'll see more of that, and some of this may bring some of that on. I mean, again, there are lots of different control frameworks you can put around, and I won't name a particular brand or hosting organization. Sitting down with those organizations, understanding what their control frameworks are, who has what responsibilities, understanding that if you're expecting to go to a cloud-based environment, you're going to have to make some investments of time and energy to have it as secure as you would as if you were in an on-prem. It's just a different control framework. And so making sure that you're positioned to have those conversations and don't expect that you're going to get something for nothing.
Our next question is from Stina, and she's got a really interesting question. I'm excited to hear the answer to this. Since you've been in your role as CISO of Medtronic, what has been your most profound executive decision you've made?
Wow, that's a deep one. I know it's profound. I think it's not just about my role. It's really about building a highly effective team and empowering those team members to drive the right behaviors, the right incentives, and to do the right thing. So really, to me, it's about the team that you build, and then you, as a leader, provide the right guidance and governance, provide the right resources, help them get through things, take down barriers, and then get out of the way and let them do good work. But I was talking about, I don't know, when you lost me, that's about profound decisions, I think it was. It really is, we have been extremely open with our benchmarking with other organizations. We learn so much from others every day, and they learn from us, hopefully. And so when I think about probably the most impactful thing that we do, it is we invest a fair amount of time with others to find out what they're doing, what their successes are, and being very, very open and transparent in how we do that.
I'm going to take the opportunity with that little hiccup to ask a question about something that's near and dear to MHTA's heart, which is the border-to-border broadband program. Do you see that playing a bigger role for companies as more folks are going to end up working remotely?
I have to believe it will, especially as you look at our state and just the wealth of organizations and talent. It's not just in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or Rochester, or Duluth, or St. Cloud, or Fargo-Moorhead. I mean, it's spread everywhere. And whether you're working remotely as an employee of an organization, whether you're running an enterprise or a small startup organization, you're going to need to have the bandwidth. And we as a state need to be competitive and being able to provide that capability. So I think it is critical, and I think it will get the attention it needs to.
All right, this next question is from Grace. What has been the most alarming threat during COVID?
I'm not sure it's so much an alarming threat. It's a new threat. As I said earlier, the threats are very similar to what it was before. The threats are, information loss, information theft, destruction or damage through like ransomware or something like that. I mean, those are the threats. It's the method by which those threats are carried out, and leveraging the COVID as the means by which to get you to do something you wouldn't normally do. So tricking you into clicking on something or clicking, or because that's all it's about, right? It's about theft of credentials so that then they can do something or get something from you. It's criminal activity. So I think the threats are the same. Even the technical methods by which they're executed are very, very similar, if not the same. It's just the messaging, it's the wrapper around that to trick you into doing something that you wouldn't otherwise do.
Gotcha. This next question is from David. If the security of the endpoint, which may now be in a home and not behind a corporate network, how do you verify that those endpoints are secure, especially if the company doesn't own them?
That's a challenge. Yeah, if you're doing a BYOD type situation and you're not managing that endpoint, so if you're letting somebody come into your environment using a home device, a home computer, we're not big adopters at Medtronic of BYOD. We are very much around the messaging of being able to control and manage the endpoint, especially if it's a corporate asset. When we work with third parties who need to get access to our systems, we use very, 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 very tight controls around virtual environments that come in, so it limits what they're able to do, and we monitor and check for that on a regular basis. So it's a challenge. I think it all depends on the architecture of the organization, what information people have access to. But again, if it's I'm using my own personal computer to get access to a company asset, that's got to be controlled pretty tightly back at the asset level, so that you can't have bad things that occur in the home occur on the corporate or on the business network.
Great. I've got a couple of interesting questions about looking forward. This one's from David. Do you see the success we've seen in being able to conduct virtual meetings lead to the reduction in corporate travel and face-to-face meetings?
Yeah, I think that's almost inevitable. Because let's face it, a lot of us travel a lot, and it's expensive and it takes time. And there's a huge advantage of being able to, especially in our organization, we're a global enterprise. I've got people in all kinds of time zones. You need to get out there and spend time with them. In today's world right now, that's not possible because of the COVID situation. I think we're going to see some challenges through this year when it comes to air travel, and restrictions or limitations on availability. We know the airlines are cut back dramatically. So I see the remote type work being essential. I see the use of these tools that we're using right here as being essential. I see the travel budgets coming down significantly. And I just see the meetings, the face-to-face stuff that you would normally want to do because it's important to have relationships with people. We're going to see, at least for the first half of the year, if not even beyond, I think a significant reduction. We all want to get back to normal. I don't know that we know what the plan is to get to normal. We're actually doing some benchmarking right now with some peers and other companies on what their plans are for kind of the return to work and what's that model. Because we turned it off in a hurry. I think everyone agrees we're not going to turn it back on in a hurry, and there's steps we have to take to get from here to there. And that's what organizations are trying to work through.
Building on that, I've got another question about kind of assumptions. So we talked a little bit about that earlier. Is it too early to make assumptions about the new normal, and what kind of assumptions can you make now with confidence?
Well, I think we talked about a bunch of them already. It's going to be, we're not going back to the same runway we took off from. We're landing on a different runway. We don't necessarily know what that destination looks like right now. And we can try to predict it. I think there is so much uncertainty in terms of what this disease is going to, and this virus is going to bring. I think everyone's expecting some changes in waves of activity. And so I think what we're going to see is that maybe attempted return to work under certain circumstances, with face masks, temperature sensing, all those kinds of things. But as soon as we get, we're gonna have those relapses, so to speak, those waves of infection. I think people are very concerned about, and I'm not a health expert by any stretch of the imagination, just what I'm reading. They're concerned about the reinfection rates, especially as we get into the fall and winter. And so I think the key for IT professionals and security professionals is to build your capabilities now to be ready for yourself, your teams, your staff to be able to work as you have, but do it very effectively from anywhere and do it securely. We had a situation in our organization where we really got two sides of my team. One is the cyber side, the traditional SOC and CERT and SIM type work. And then the other is physical security. I've got the physical security organization across Medtronic. And they work together, but they're all sort of different. So I've got really two different operation centers. The team that was doing the SOC, the CERT, the cyber type defense work have been operating remotely in a virtual setting because of where they're located for literally years, and they've been very, very effective at it. So having them go from a on-prem to an off-prem type situation was not that difficult because they've been doing it. My other team, the physical team, which is a 24-hour operations center, with screens and the whole bit, they hadn't put those capabilities in place. So they had to scramble, did great work. They went in a matter of days to weeks to being able to have to operate in a center, to be able to operate very dispersed and not even have that center. So now we have a capability that we didn't have before. And so going forward, I think organizations using that kind of example are going to have to say, what do I have to do to be able to be fully effective, to meet the needs of my business, my customers, my stakeholders, in a completely dispersed setting without compromising capabilities. That takes a lot of work depending upon what you're doing and what your job is.
And this next question is from Jeff. How are you utilizing data science to get in front of any security concerns being driven by COVID?
Not so much by COVID. I mean, we've done some data science work specifically in anomaly detection in recent years, and now we're applying some of that to what we're seeing in COVID. A lot of it goes to use tools like DLP, some of the other tools that we have in place that help us understand what is normal activity versus what is not normal activity. So we're talking large data sets, large sets of log files, algorithms to check that kind of data, using DLP to look for activity and changes in activity and patterns. So I guess that's all data science, but using that against large data sets so we can get ahead of bad things that might be happening.
I'll use that to move into this as well. So does robotics or autonomy create any cybersecurity issues?
They do, and robotics especially. We are, as a company, very active in robotic surgery research and rollout of those technologies. We have a pretty good team that does work on, in all of our business units, on device security and has for many, many, many years. When I think about robotics, though, I think also about remote control. And we have deployed tools, and we are deploying tools to allow our staff to support physicians in operating theaters and in clinics with capabilities that they would have had to otherwise be physically there to do. We're now rolling out some technologies that allows them to do much more remote work and to still be part of that treatment, part of that therapy, to assist that physician and the patient, but to do it in a remote setting.
This is a really interesting question we've got. How do you envision careers in security ramping up or changing because of the new normal? How has security tech talent pipeline been impacted?
Well, the security talent pipeline has been I call it the negative unemployment rate. It's anywhere from 30 to 40% down in terms of not having enough resources to address it. I think so much of it is going to have to be, as it is today, having those resources, being able to work remote, being able to work independent, yet also be connected with their peers, working through the processes, using the same tools, using the same methodologies to support the remote worker. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you've got the right tools and technologies at your endpoint that are feeding that back to your central systems, so that you have that pulse, you know what's going on, you know what's normal on those endpoints, you know what's normal on those servers. You'll have that visibility, and you can chase it help you find the needles in the haystacks. But again, you have to have the right people trained with the right procedures to do that kind of work. But there's a shortage of staff across the board. And so being able to leverage your people to do what you need people to do, and leverage the technologies and tools to let the technologies help you determine what is most important for those people to be doing.
This next question is from Dalton, and he wanted to know what made you decide to enter the security industry.
Well, I've been in the IT field for a long time. I've been in my role for 6 years. Prior to this, I ran other parts of IT at Medtronic and other parts of IT in other companies. Security was kind of a natural for me. I came out of the U.S. Intelligence business at one point in my life, and so the security stuff was a natural follow-on from that work.
This next question is from Josh. Are there any positions that you've heard of or you feel that should not be primarily remote that would need to be on-prem?
Good question. If it's positions themselves that have to be on-prem, it's always a physical presence kind of thing. If you've got people there that need support, if you're operating in a call center that can't be dispersed, you're going to have tech support and resources there. It's hard for me to pick out a particular role or job that can't be remote. I think a lot of it has to do with the maturity of the organization and what kind of process and procedure they put in place. Because some people work better in a setting, some people can work better in a remote setting and independently. I think a lot of that depends on the person. But there's also roles and functions that you need to have some physical people there. If you're doing high-tech manufacturing like we do in a clean room setting, we're not going to disperse the clean room. The clean room is there, and we're going to have staff there to support that kind of activity.
Rajiv has a good question. What should enterprises be doing to avoid ransomware attacks, and what should be their typical response in such a situation?
Well, typical response would be, let's go to avoid the avoid part first. It is some of the things we've talked about already. I mean, ransomware is specifically, it's a case where somebody's either clicked on something in an email, or somebody has for some reason, they've lost their credentials. Their credentials have been given to somebody else. And if those credentials had enough authority and power to give an attacker the ability to move laterally within the organization, to install software and to hit the triggers for that to go off, but then you've got vulnerability. If you keep your defensive systems patched, if you keep your monitoring software up to date, if you keep your endpoints patched, if you have the right software in place to detect and block malicious activity and phishing, if you have privileged account management software in place and you've really done the work to figure out who are your privileged users and how do you control those passwords so that you can avoid lateral movement of a user, then you're on your way to avoiding a ransomware activity. The other recovery aspect of that is it very much is it depends. If it's a ransomware against a particular device and you've got good backups for that device, then you probably can clean that up and restore it, and you're good to go. Obviously, there's a lot more detail to it than that. But so the response component of it is something you definitely want to bring in a third-party expert to help you with.
So moving off of that topic, I think for a remote workforce, it sounds like you need to ratchet up security awareness training. What does that content and training look like?
We do a fair amount of that, and it's a continuous conversation and dialogue with your end users, and it's trying to make it fun. It's not just about the security people trying to scare you every day. We have a very aggressive program for security awareness training education, annualized requirements, regular updates. We have colleagues across the enterprise that we call security partners that are embedded in each part of the business that are part of that process. They're a feedback to our organization. We do the traditional anti-phishing education and awareness. We do a fair amount of just regular updates and newsletters. Again, we keep it brief, keep it interesting, try to make it fun. It's all about behavior. It's all about having people understand what their responsibilities are and how they can help avoid a problem for the organization.
Next question is from Marty. Hi, Pat. Has your team noticed a variance on the level of suspicious attacks, either up or down, in the last month or so?
It has been both up and down. So we've seen the COVID-related phishing attacks ramp up. We saw a big spike 2 weeks ago. I think about a 300% increase in phishing attacks related to that had a kind of a COVID theme to them. We saw that drop a little bit last week. So it's up and down, but it's absolutely there. And it goes back to that bad actor or that attacker it's a business model, right? They got to change their business model if they want to get new customers, and unfortunately, you're the customer.
This is looking forward a little bit to when people are coming back on site. Will Medtronic be implementing health checks for employees to enter facilities, fever, cough, or something like that? And if so, how will that information be stored, secured, to ensure privacy?
Yeah, actually, we are doing that, and we've done that already, especially in places where we have, like I said, clean room manufacturing type things. And again, it depends on the location, but we have done some of that already. We've implemented it. The way it's designed from a HIPAA and privacy standpoint is not to collect that information at a personal level. It's more about reacting to that if somebody does trigger an alert, that the proper protocols are in place. But it's not an automated type of thing where data is put into a database and it's stored against the individual.
You mentioned before in the most impactful decision that you made that benchmarking and working with other folks was really important. Have CISOs across the Twin Cities and Minnesota been collaborating more to ensure a safer community outside of just your organization?
Yeah, actually we do. We have a number of organizations here in town, some of the bigger companies that you would recognize the names of. About 4 years ago, we got together as the CISOs, and we all knew each other anyway, and we agreed to basically take our relationship, which was good, down levels in our organization. We had regular gatherings, regular exchanges of information, and those people at those levels in our organizations are on speed dial, and they have a highly trusted relationship. So that's been important for us. It's been critical for not just benchmarking in terms of capabilities and what are you doing about this or what are you doing about that, but in a situation like this, understanding what challenges different companies have might help you get ahead of something. So we do that on a very regular basis, and it's proven to be just critical for us.
And internally, what metrics do you use to measure the effectiveness of information security programs that you've got?
Well, there's a whole myriad of metrics that we monitor, dashboards that we keep track of, and it's really around kind of following the NIST framework of prevent, detect, respond. And so there are different metrics that we follow in each one of those categories to prevent the bad thing from happening, detecting it if it does, what do you do about it, or avoiding it. And then how do you respond? How quickly do you respond? And again, there's probably 20 metrics across those three categories that we track on a monthly basis, report to our board and our senior leadership.
Pat, I think we want to know, what has been your go-to for stress relief during your time at home?
Well, I tell you, it's going to be a whole lot better now that spring has finally arrived in Minnesota. I was wondering, I like to play golf. I'm not very good, and I'm glad the governor found a way for us to safely do that. So that's hopefully that's going to help with the stress relief. I like boating, and the boat went in the water 2 days ago. So between those two things, if I can do those two things safely, I think that'll help with future stress relief.
Just on a broader topic there, how do you establish your work-life balance?
It's a challenge, and it's interesting. I've got a friend, and many of you probably have heard of Paul Botts, who does the Goodness Network. He's written a number of books, and one of his books was on. I don't have it here in front of me, but he talked about the word is not work-life balance; it's work-life blending. And I'm a believer in that. And it's in today's world, I'm not sure, especially in IT or in security, that you can turn it on and turn it off. You try to, but it's very, very difficult. And the expectation is, especially these days, is pretty much always on. But as you said, you need to have a balance. So it's finding that way to blend in and say, okay, here I'm going to work on this, and then I'm going to step away from that, and I'm going to go do this. So it's finding that way to have the two kind of coexist. And that's just, unfortunately, in the nature of being a CISO or the nature of being in security, that's kind of what we do. But I think it's more and more true for everybody. I'm not sure it's entirely healthy, but I think it is the reality.
Do you have any favorite TV shows or movies you've been watching or binging?
Well, I have to almost laugh at the question, because I hear people talking about all this Netflix binging, et cetera, and I have not had a free moment to. I do have a few shows I watch here and there, but I have not had a spare moment since we've been in this situation to sit in front of the TV.
Pat, where would you recommend a leader starting to learn their security skills to move into a security role?
That's tough, because I'm not sure that there is a single path. So if there's somebody that's already in the IT or other technical space and they want to move across into security, to me, it's more about leadership than about necessarily having all the certifications and the technical skills.
Gotcha. Well, we're going to start wrapping up here. We've gone through about 45 minutes of questions. I'll take a moment and talk about some upcoming events that we've got. And if you want to enter your last questions in, we may ask another couple. But I want to talk about some of the events that we've got coming up. If you enjoyed what we're doing today, we've got 3 events coming up in the next few weeks that I really wanted to cover for everyone. The first is a Tech Talk panel on selling thoughtfully through crisis. That's on April 29th. We're all figuring this out together, and we know that vendors are an important part of connecting technology leaders and practitioners to innovative solutions. Their role is essential to keep Minnesota's tech community moving forward, and our panelists from Kovat, Zoom, and ServiceNow will provide insights into how to best navigate the current COVID-19 crisis. The second is a peer forum on May 7th for data analytics. Data 360, strategy, adaptation, and moving through disruption is a small group conversation for data leaders to talk through what's most pressing right now. Data leaders from different industries will discuss data strategy and hear from current thought leaders. The first half of the event will feature leaders from Target, Abbott, Land O'Lakes, and Securian. The second half of the event is discussion-based and will allow data analytics leaders to dig in deeper to the problems and solutions that everyone is trying to solve, while getting different industry viewpoints from the other peer forum invitees. Attendance is limited for this one to individuals who lead data analytics or data science teams within their respective organizations or a similar position. So if you'd like to take part in this event, or if you know someone who would be a good fit for it, I'd really like you to email MHTA's Director of Community Engagement, Jade Denson. She can be reached at jade@mhta.org. You can do that to request an invitation. Finally, if you've enjoyed this format, we have an AMA with Structural CEO and Gov Delivery founder Scott Burns on May 14th. You can join us to get to know Scott and learn how he built a company from the basement to 250 people and a $150 million sale in 2016, and how that's informed his work in building Structural. So Pat, do you have any other thoughts as we're logging off today?
Nothing other than, I think, obviously MHTA is doing a lot of work to try to create opportunities like this that are going to be virtual, and I applaud you for doing that. I think any opportunity to bring people together and share ideas and share experiences is truly valuable. I think we're going to go through some interesting times, and I think MHTA is showing that level of flexibility and leadership to try to find out what that new normal or new abnormal looks like for a while. So I applaud what you guys are doing, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Pat. I want to thank all of you for taking some time out of your day, and especially to Pat for joining us. If we didn't get around to answering your questions, if you have questions about membership with the organization, or if you have ideas for an upcoming event, please email me at mhta or rhoover@mhta.org. Thanks for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon.